All right, so we wanted Amy's class of fifth graders have been studying the Vietnam War. So a lot of things they've learned and read, so they had questions that they wanted to, actually ask somebody who served and lived it and experienced it. So this is just going to be a set of questions that her students have came up with from what they've learned. So just to start with, what's your name?
Charles Arnold Hope. I use the term Charles because when you go in the military, they call you by your first name. I was raised in the country, and in the country it went by your middle name. When I first got in basic training, they'd say Charles Hope. I didn't know who they was talking about.
There you go.
And you were raised. Where did you live at the time?
Brenda and I, we were married, and I was living in Atlanta, working for Delta Airlines. I went to work in May of '66, September of '67. I received a letter from the United States government that said, "Congratulations, you are now a member of the United States Armed Forces. You will report to so-and-so at such and such a date and such a time." And I said, "Thank you."
So that was one of the questions they wanted to know if you joined or if you were drafted. So you were drafted.
Was in 1967, the draft was still in effect. Young men at the age of 19 and 20 was subject to be drafted, yes.
And how old were you when you got drafted?
I was 19 years old. I was drafted in September at the age of 19. I went to basic training, Fort Benning, Georgia. I spent 8 weeks. Then they sent me to Fort McClellan, Alabama for advanced infantry training. I was at Fort McClellan, Alabama when I turned 20 years old in December.
So you graduated, you lived in Geraldine, Alabama.
I went to school at Geraldine, raised on a farm, went to school at Geraldine, went to Atlanta, went to work for Delta Airlines from Cotton Field.
And that's when you received your draft letter?
Yes, I was in Atlanta. Me and Brenda was in Atlanta when I received my draft notice.
All right, and some of these questions may skip around. I'll try to keep them in order. One student asked, once you received your notice or your draft letter, I guess what was your emotions? Were they asked, were you scared, nervous, proud, confident? I guess what emotions went through your mind?
In 1967, there's still a lot of patriotism. People love their country. We weren't in the situation we're in today. I never give any thought to it. My daddy served in Korean War. I had a brother that was already in the military. If I'd have done anything other than go, I would have shamed my mother and daddy.
All right, so we may so from Fort McClellan, did you go, how did you get to Vietnam?
After I finished advanced infantry training at Fort McClellan, they gave me a 2-week leave. After going home for 2 weeks, I went to Atlanta, Georgia. I got on the airplane. They flew me to Fort Lewis, Washington. I spent 3 days in Fort Lewis, Washington. At that time, in '68, when I went, there was a large buildup of American troops. At one time, 500,000 U.S. soldiers in Vietnam. And the airlines, commercial airlines, were running charter flights. And they put me on an airplane. They flew out. We stopped in the Philippines for refueling. We were there about an hour and a half, put back on there. Total of 18 hours when I landed in Saigon, South Vietnam.
And I'm going to try to show them here, just so we can show them how far that was, but I don't know, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So around, well, his family was in Geraldine. He was in right here around Atlanta, Georgia. And where he ended up in Vietnam would have been right here, which is kind of directly down below China and next to Thailand and some of those. So I'm sure that was obviously the furthest you had probably been from home. I
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
All right. So one of the questions they asked, were you in North or South Vietnam?
South Vietnam.
Okay.
The United States military did not go into North Vietnam. Here's the reason. It's partly political. If we'd went in and invaded North Vietnam, we could have ended that war in 2 weeks. But you run the risk of getting Russia and China both were supplying North Vietnam. United States is supplying South Vietnam. If we'd have went in North Vietnam, you could have ended up with a world war. We didn't want that.
Right. Okay. One question. It says who was your leader in the Vietnam War? I guess what was your? Was you a private? Started out as?
I went to Vietnam as a private. After 5 months in country, after private, I was promoted to corporal. After 5 months, I was promoted to sergeant. The reason being, the military required you to have so many non-commissioned officers, and when you lose a lot of people, sometimes you get promoted.
Right.
Just because they had to have somebody, and as a sergeant, I was a squad leader.
So, oh, sorry.
Well, I was going to be a squad leader. I had 5 men in my squad. There are 4 squads in a platoon. A platoon is 20 men. A commissioned officer, normally a first lieutenant, was the platoon leader. They were not drafted, they joined.
And we may have mentioned it, but you were in the Army, but what was your group called?
I was with the 1st Cavalry Division. We were infantry. We was in the 1st Cavalry. We didn't ride horses. They carried us from where there was a battle. They would carry us from one place to the other on helicopters.
That's one, because you got there from commercial flights
I flew on the commercial airline to Saigon.
to Saigon.
From Saigon, I got on what they call a C-130 airplane, which is actually a cargo airplane.
Mm-hmm.
But they put us on a C-130 in Saigon, and they flew me to Da Nang. That's in North Vietnam. From Da Nang, we went by truck I was not in a city, I was they carried me to what was called an LZ, a landing zone. All it was a place to resupply us. And they had what they call headquarters company that was at the landing zone, and they stayed there. And they were responsible for getting all supplies in, getting us ammo, getting us potable water, getting us sea rations. If you don't know what sea rations are, they were canned food, and that's what we were while we were out in the field, you ate from a can.
Okay, yeah, that was one of the questions.
The sea rations were canned during World War II, but that's canned and sealed. But you would get come in a little box. You'd have 1 can of like it'd either be beef stew, beans and franks, spaghetti. One was canned ham and eggs. Now you talk about delicious, you ought to get you some of that. But in that little pack, there would be that, then there'd be a can of fruit. There'd be applesauce, apricots, peaches, or fruit cocktail. Then you'd have a little round can that would have 2 little round crackers and 2 dark chocolate in it.
Okay.
That's what is contained in sea rations.
Yeah, they wanted to know what you had to eat. They wanted to know, I guess your sleep when you slept, was it intense? Did y'all sleep
No.
in shifts? Or
You
just,
do not sleep in a tent. You're out in a jungle, very dense growth. At night, we would set up when we're not on the helicopter, we were just on foot. We would set up a perimeter, a circle, and you put guards in. You didn't sleep all the time. You might sleep 2 hours at a time. You're on guard. After you have seen the evil that mankind can inflict on mankind, sleep is not what you're wanting to do.
yeah. So part of that, I guess the terrain, they learned, there was a jungle. They had questions what the jungle was like.
I personally was in the Central Highlands of North Vietnam. It was, if it hadn't been for war, it was beautiful country. It's it don't get cold weather. It's a mountain, then a valley, then a mountain. In the valleys would be where the civilian population lived. And it was the poorest nation I thought I was raised poor, but raised on a farm. One of the first things I noticed, I left a farm, we had a tractor. Prior to that, we had mules. They plowed a rice paddy with a water buffalo. I never saw an automobile. I never saw any electricity except at Saigon by the network provided by the United States government.
So one of the questions was, what kind of animals did you see? I guess it would have been different from where you were from.
One thing we always kept an eye out for, especially when you talk about sleeping, they had tigers in Vietnam. They had elephants. They had, it was very populated with snakes. So you had to be careful all the time. And they had monkeys. I never saw a dog or a cat in 13 months.
Unless it was on a plate, maybe?
Well, now this is how poor they was.
Yeah.
This used to be a joke among us. If there was a dog, there would be a Vietnamese chasing it.
Yeah.
Now, I know that don't sound like us, but you got to remember their main diet was rice.
Yeah.
Every little community, and that would be real small, but all they would have raising be rice paddies. They didn't raise nothing. They'd eat rice and fish. That's all they ate.
I imagine they didn't have pets just to have pets.
No,
That's probably
they did not.
wasn't the way.
They didn't even have. We don't realize how blessed we are in our nation. The only house I ever, now in Saigon, the United States Army built buildings, and they had buildings that they had built there. But where I was at in the Central Highlands, I never saw a building made out of wood. All it would be a little round hutch with some poles, and the roof was made out of straw.
Wow.
That's all they had.
So you slept just on the ground?
Yes, and I'm not trying to sound, I'm just gonna say this. I have slept and it pouring down rain, and I had a steel pot, I put my steel pot over my face to keep it from raining in my face. You get tired enough, you can
Yeah.
sleep. But like I say, you would sleep 2 or 3 hours, and then
Right.
that was it.
So when you were there, did you get sick, injured, or anything like that?
Vietnam was not for the people that live there, they're accustomed to it. A lot of American soldiers got malaria, and I did. I contacted malaria while I was there, but other than that, no, I was sick. The first time I saw combat, I was sick. Yes.
Was there like an infirmary for you to get better, or how did they get treated?
They sent me down to a city called Quy Nhon, which was close to Saigon, which was a relatively secure area. And they sent, it was called a hospital. You know what chicken houses look like now?
Yeah.
That's what the hospital looked like.
So did you have any, I guess, friends from back home that served or went over there with you?
I did not go over with anybody that I knew growing up with. I didn't even go over with anybody that I was in Fort Benning with. There was a lot of division up when I left Fort Benning, went to at Fort McClellan for advanced infantry training. I didn't go over or there wasn't anybody that I spent training with in my platoon.
Okay. So you probably just made friends with the ones you were serving
Yes,
with.
you do that.
One question I asked, it says, during the war, did you feel like you wanted to quit or just keep going for the people?
After 17 weeks of training, you in combat, you're fighting as one unit. You're depending on the guy next to you on this side of you, the guy on this side of you to fight. You're trained. And this don't sound good, but we're talking about combat. You're trained to kill whatever's in front of you. And you're not doing it only for yourself, but you're doing it for your fellow soldier. After you see death in combat, I couldn't explain to you what it looks like. Ain't no way to explain to you what it looks like. But after you see that, you're fighting for survival. You forget, I know this don't sound good, you forget about defending the United States of America. You're fighting to stay alive and the people that's with you.
I would imagine that saying, kill or be killed, I would imagine that would be the
Yes,
mindset
and
you have to have.
you come out of training. In 17 weeks of training, they break you down mentally and they have to in combat, because whatever they tell you to do, whatever the company commander and they tell you to do, that's what you do, and you don't give any thought to it. You don't think about, well, I may get killed doing this. You're trained that whatever they tell you to do, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Without giving thought. If you give thought to it, you wouldn't do it.
Right. Well, and you touched on this a little bit, but there was a lot of questions about the weather. I know you said it never got cold. Was it humid? It rained a lot? What the weather was
Most
like?
of the time, it would be 95 degrees, humidity. It's a jungle area, very humid climate. Humidity would be about 90%. And they have, in that part of the world, when they have rain, it's called monsoon. When it starts raining, it'll rain for 3 months. Off and on, I don't mean it rains 24 hours a day, but it rains every day. And it'll do that for 3 months.
Was it very hot? Do you remember?
Extremely hot, but you get acclimated to it after that, cause you never, matter of fact, it'll be so hot and humid that in the rain you get wet, you'll get cool. But there's no such thing in the south. Ain't no air conditioning.
Was it a different kind of heat? I mean, you grew up farming in Alabama.
Yes, it is.
It's a different kind
Farming.
of hot.
Alabama, I was born and raised at Sand Mountain. The humidity was never like it was there. It was humid there all the time. The the weather was so bad in such a humid climate. After I'd been there for 3 or 4 months or so, now this ain't like you take a bath. You don't shower and shave every day. You don't even brush your teeth. But it got to the point where we was having so much skin disease, your feet. It got to wherever what they try to do, at least once a month, they'd take us to a rear area, let us get showers, and they'd give us a hot meal. Now, shower consisted of a wooden frame with a 55-gallon barrel sitting on the top of it, filled with water, and you turned the spigot on, that was a shower. But it felt good if you ain't had one.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of talked, there was a lot of questions about what you ate, you know, the weather, the jungle, the terrain, how you slept. Another one that was asked a lot was, I guess what, they used the word armor, but what did you wear, and then what kind of weapons were you given to defend yourself?
I personally had a M16 rifle, and I had a 45 caliber automatic pistol. I was in the mortar platoon. The mortar was 81 millimeter mortar. Everybody in my platoon would carry one mortar round with them. Somebody'd have to carry the blunt base plate of the mortar. Somebody'd have to carry the tube. Far as when you first get in country, you got jungle fatigues on, you got all that. After you've been there a while, I don't know if you want to edit this out. You don't wear socks, you don't wear underwear. You got on a pair of jungle fatigues, and you got a green t-shirt on. You got on the steel pot, and you got on what was called a flat vest. It was a vest of fiberglass, different and real thick, and it was hot. But it would stop shrapnel. It probably wouldn't stop the bullet up close. But after you experience combat, then everybody have to tell you put it on, you wear it.
Right.
Steel pot's heavy. You see combat, you put that thing on.
In your steel pot, you talking about your helmet, like your hard
Yes.
shell helmet?
Yes.
Okay.
It's made out of metal.
Okay. This is a very specific question by one of our students. Do you happen to know a man named Bob Parker?
If I do, I've done forgot.
That would be very small chance, I'm sure, but that was a question. Okay, I think that one's been answered. You may have touched on some of this. It says, why was the jungle fighting difficult for U.S. soldiers?
I was never in combat that we were not ambushed. You had what was called the Viet Cong. They were not North Vietnamese army. You know how we have Democrats and Republicans today? Among the South Vietnamese population, some of them were inclined to North Vietnam and communism, some of them wasn't. So at that time, they'd be out in the rice paddy working. Then at night, they'd be Viet Cong. When we were every time I was in combat with the North Vietnamese Army, we would be ambushed. We did not know that what we was walking into. That's the reason you had 50-something thousand United States soldiers killed. Most of the people that was killed would be killed in just the first minute or two.
Because they ambushed.
Yes, we had far, far superior weaponry. I've seen us, and this is against the North Vietnamese Army. They, at one time, I remember one combat I was in lasted probably, and this is the longest one I was ever in, lasted maybe 4 hours. There was 100 of us in my company. They said we were attacked by 1,300 North Vietnamese Army. It got so bad and we'd lost so many people, they told us to draw back. We just draw back in perimeter. And if you're in this, I'm sorry,
Okay.
if you're in this and they bring in F-4 fighter jets and they start dropping bombs around you, you know, have you ever seen napalm on TV? They come in with napalm, drop all that around us. They had helicopter gunships. They were not, the helicopter gunship didn't carry troops. They'd come in and they had like Gatling guns on the side. They could cut a tree down. But if you're in combat and you've lost a lot of men in that, you'll thank the Lord for the support. And plus, we could call in, they'd send artillery, you know.
Bringing more ammunition.
Yes.
Yeah. So it said, a couple people asked, did you get injured badly? So during it, did you get hit by shrapnel or?
I'm gonna say this. If you wanna edit, I'll let you. The good Lord was good to me. I got one piece of shrapnel in my nose, and they wouldn't even take it out. They said, well, it'll come out. I was working in Birmingham, Alabama, some 25 years later when it came out. Brenda Carroll still got it. It took that long to come out.
Wow. But
now that's how blessed I was. I still thank the good Lord today. It amazes me. He was wonderfully good to me.
Someone asked, I'm sure there was not, you were probably, I'm gonna assume you're either fighting or taking a brief sleep in it. They said, how did you spend your time while not fighting? But I don't know that y'all, did you have much downtime?
You would be what they call patrolling, which to me didn't make sense. You would just walk, every day you're just walking around waiting to get ambushed so you can engage the enemy, because you don't know where they're at. Again, this is jungle. And that's the reason most people got killed initially, because they just open up on you.
So, there was multiple questions just kind of asking, and you've probably talked about a lot of this, but what was the hardest part of the war, or in your own words, a summary, or what was the most challenging part?
Seeing, the most challenging part for me was seeing death. One thing we did, and I'm glad we did, I'm not complaining about that. We never left our dead on the battlefield. We have lost men going to pick up our dead. We did not do that. We did not leave them. We bring them out with us if we lost more men doing it.
were you able to, I mean, you were married when you got drafted, then
Yes.
your mom and dad were living in Geraldine. Were you able to have contact with them?
Through letters only,
Writing letters?
yes.
How often would those come or be sent?
Brenda wrote me every week. Mother and Daddy would write me at least once a month. And there was other people in the community that knew me, knew Mother and Daddy. And they would send me a letter. It was good to get a letter from home during mail call.
So one asked, was there any electric things? And I know you said
No.
there wasn't any. Did y'all have any kind of communications, radios, or?
There was the company commander had a radio operator with him, radio on his back. That's what he did. He carried a radio, yes. You could, when we call in and get artillery and F-4 fighters and Cobra gunships to come help us, the captain would call battalion and tell them, hey, we need help.
One person asked, was there school back then, which we know for you there was, the U.S., but for any of the Vietnam, was there any kind of schooling
No.
for the Vietnam people?
No.
They just learned through
There
life?
may have been some in Saigon.
Yeah.
Of course, like I said, I was in the Central Highlands, and there wasn't no cities there. Like we know what a city is. They would be, it'd be like just from lack of a better terminology, it'd be like a community. They might be 25, 30, at the most 50 people living just in a little community.
Some asked, did you have any family members? Did Uncle Archie, was he in Vietnam?
He was in the Army, but he did not go
Okay.
overseas. He was at Fort Meade, Maryland.
Okay. And then they want to know, I guess, when you found out you were drafted, what was your family's expression or what was their reaction?
Well, my daddy was in the Korean War, so he knew what war was. He was extremely upset about it. I was so unlearned, I didn't know. Nobody, there ain't anybody, all the training in the world, nobody can tell you or get you prepared for combat until you experience it.
One of the things several asked about, they had learned in class, and I don't know if this was everywhere where y'all was at, but that the Vietnamese, they would play messages through loudspeakers at night, I guess trying to discourage
Yeah.
U.S. soldiers. Did
They
you
would,
experience that?
what they would do, it came out of Hanoi, North Vietnam. They would tell us to lay our weapons down and quit and do all that, but you're already trained, you're expecting that, but you didn't hear that every day.
Okay.
You didn't hear, it wasn't a daily thing, but you would hear it, so.
Some of the ones I think Amy heard was them trying to tell you that your government was
Yeah,
abandoning you, you're
Yeah.
not coming back to get
they
you.
tell you lay your weapons down, don't fight, you're not gonna win, and we didn't. But the reason we did not win Vietnam is, like I said, it was political. We did not go into North Vietnam and attack them because we didn't want to get in the World War. All we did in South Vietnam, all we did was play defense. Be like playing a football game. If all you gonna play is defense, your chances of winning are not real good, are they?
No.
All we did was play defense. We never left South Vietnam. They, like the North Vietnamese army, would ambush us, then they'd pull back into Laos. We never crossed the border. We didn't go after them. You could not, if you're gonna win a war, you're gonna have to take ground and keep it. We just went up one mountain, then in the valley, and up the next, we never kept anything.
Never secured, you never secured
No.
a certain area,
No, we did not.
just moved on. One question here, let's be the last couple ones, but, did you learn anything as far as like life lessons while serving?
I learned, it was, brought home to me how precious life is. And they, in that part of the world, have very little thought of life. It's not like it is among us. They didn't think anything about life.
One of the last questions, and you can kind of answer this and then just add anything else in closing you want, but I guess it says, what did you do after the war? She made us want to say when you were able to leave and go back home.
When I, at that time, during Vietnam, if you were drafted, you get a 12-month tour, then you rotated out, just because the war was so unpopular in the United States. The United States turned against the war because at that time, that's the first war that was televised. You could see it every night on television. And you got mamas and daddies seeing their sons killed, put in body bags, sent home, so it was a very unpopular war. I got on an airplane at Saigon to come home. I'd been there 13 months. I didn't want anything in the world but to come home. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Okay.
When that plane left the ground in Saigon, it was deafening. The rejoicing that was going on. But to show you how forgetful I am of the Lord, I promised the good Lord, when that thing left, when I left Saigon, I said, good Lord, if you'll let this plane land safe. I was going back to Fort Lewis, Washington. I said, if you'll let this plane land safe, Fort Lewis, Washington, I promised him I'd never complained about nothing else. I got to Fort Lewis, Washington, and took them about 36 hours to get me out of the Army. I wasn't there 12 hours. I started complaining because it was taking them so long to get me out of there. I wanted to go home.
Mm-hmm.
They put me on an airplane at Fort Lewis, Washington, and flew me to Chicago. We got to Chicago, the airplane was going to be there for an hour and a half. If I get off the airplane, I'm still sitting there. The flight attendant says, sir, we're going to be here for an hour and a half. You want to fly? I said, ma'am, when this airplane leaves for Atlanta, Georgia, I'm going to be on it.
Yeah.
You're not going to leave me. I'm going home. And I stayed on it the whole hour and a half. I wasn't about to get
And there wasn't no phones or nothing to get
No,
on.
I said, you ain't leaving me in Chicago. I'm going home.
Well, I think that covered about all the questions. I appreciate you taking the time to answer and educate us.
I hadn't thought about it. I don't think about that every day. I do think about life and how precious life is. And after being there, I want to say this. As Americans, we're spoiled. We are spoiled rotten.
Yeah.
We think if everybody in the family had got a car, we're hurting.
Yeah.
They didn't have nothing.
Yeah.
They didn't have anything.
Sure.
We really don't know what it's like to have to do without anything. We don't.
Take for granted.
And
a lot of things.
now don't you take offense to this.